From his role as editor-in-chief of Numéro China to his collaborations with renowned luxury brands, Karchun Leung's expertise in the fashion realm is unmatched. Join us as we explore his journey, cultural influences, and the dynamic world of Chinese fashion. It's time to dive in.
Hello there. How are you doing?
I'm good. It's at
Good.
night. It's at night in Shanghai, so yeah.
What time do you usually go to bed?
Well, around midnight. It depends. I wake up quite early right now because it's like for my son. But yeah, but it's all good.
That's one thing I noticed when I was in Shanghai. Is like everybody goes to bed so late, but in the morning there's not a lot of people in the streets. Because I'm a morning
Yeah.
riser too. When you have kids, you don't have an option. But I remember waking up early and walking around the city. It was like waking up very slowly.
Well, you will see a lot of like old people walking on the street really early. But because you have been in Shanghai, so the nightlife is actually pretty long. So we work late and then we have dinner late and then you probably want a drink before you go to sleep. So yeah, that's quite normal for young people. They want to hang out longer.
Well, I was hanging out with the old people clearly because I was up early
But
trying to
I think
work and
it's
enjoying the
a
city.
yeah, it's so good. I mean, the well, you have different period of time in your lifetime, and then you change. Sometimes you're trying to change your maybe your lifestyle, or you want something different. Especially like the change of COVID, and then you're seeing a lot of things. You change your perspective of your life, and yeah. So that's why I decided to wake up early for my son and to have a breakfast with yeah have a breakfast with him and then walk him out to school. Yeah.
It's and I mean, you have a very interesting background because you not only has done journalism in fashion for 20 plus years, you also were helping brands with the branding aspect in penetrating the Chinese market. Now, what is so different about China that we from the US or in Europe doesn't really quite understand when it comes to fashion or even luxury goods?
I think I talk a little bit about myself, which easier for you to understand because I come from Hong Kong and then I start on newspaper. So which
Hmm.
is quite traditional media, which is like a long it feels like long time ago. It's like 20 something years. And then I start with newspaper, and then I started on man gadgets and stuff. And after that, I work on fashion. And that moment of time, I feel like, okay, I kind of really like fashion, so I started to work on it, focus on it. But after 3 years, and when I was working in newspaper, things got quite routine because, like when you work for newspaper, everything had to be happen and finished on the same day, and then you don't have much to plan because it's like a reaction. So you react on stuff, even for fashions. Like when you go to like a show, you have to run back to the office to write it down because it's like it has to be on the newspaper next day. So I've done pretty much on that, but I still think I like fashion a lot, so there is a chance for me to move on. So I joined like a quite big company in Hong Kong called IT, which is
Mm.
like a multi-brand store. It's quite big at the moment. And then I was working on visual merchandising. And at that period of time, I changed the perspective from like media into like brands. So you work as an observer or critic before, and then you work inside the industry. So you see fashion quite different. But after 2 years, there is like a magazine called City Magazine will ask me to join. And City Magazine is like a quite um I would say it's like avant-garde magazine in Hong Kong, which kind of like incubate a lot of like talent. So when they
Mm.
asked me to join, I think, okay, wow, that's pretty nice. It's a let, let, it's something like wallpaper in UK. So it's like when they asked me to join, I think, oh, okay, this is a good opportunity. So that's why I moved back to media, and then I focused on fashion. And that was the time I started to go to Fashion Week, which is like really checking out like the International Fashion Week, and then go see a lot of like the designer and meet with people in the industries and stuff. Um, and after a few years, there is an opportunity for me to move to Shanghai, and then I go to Shanghai for another media called Modern Weekly.
Mm.
And when I was in Shanghai, there is a lot of like it's not like right now, which is like it's very fashionable and stuff, but it's quite interesting because it's like they don't have that much like Chinese people at that moment. They don't have that much knowledge about fashion, which actually they don't have too much perception about fashion, which is actually fascinating because it's like if you are a new brand or like an independent designer, there are lots of opportunity because the customer here is very open to all different type of like design or brands because they were not so attached by brand. But now, of course, well, after how much year? I was arriving Shanghai on 2007.
Mm.
So right now it's like more, it's around 15 years, and there were so many things has been changed, but I still think like one of the most important thing or most inspiring thing about China is people are very open on fashion and people want to be fashion. So which is quite interesting because
Mm.
it's not that um it's not that much place like here because it's like when you talk about America, you talk about France, or you talk about Italy, they most of the people they have a sort of like a style or like a perception about what is fashion, and which is always related to their parents or the societies and stuff. But in China, I think it's like there is quite dynamic, and that's what I think quite fascinating.
I'll tell a little bit about my experience. So first time I went to Shanghai, I think was 2018, 19. I think it was 18. And I was invited to speak at Design Shanghai. And at that point, I was pleasantly surprised what I saw. And I agree with what a lot of you said. It was a very energetic, a lot of great energy, fashion forward. You can tell that people are really trying to, explore the individuality, but also, engage with fashion in products. But I also open up my mind to see a lot of young talent people not only trying to explore new technologies and new techniques, but also going back to very traditional Chinese way to do things in terms of craftsmanship and the furniture and some design aspect. So that was a very open mind experience for me, and I enjoyed it. And that year I went back to China, I think, 3 or 4 times in the span of a year, and to Shanghai. But a lot of people were telling me that Shanghai, you can't compare China to Shanghai. It's not like you have to
Yeah,
you
yeah,
have to travel more, and that's all the experience I had, at least in mainland China. But I saw that I was able to see that on the young people, like really excited. There was that energy in the city. Is that, and of course the world changed since then. We had COVID. Do you feel like that's still around? People still like very excited about new things in design, and the young people is more motivated than ever before.
yeah. Yeah, which is quite true. When we say Shanghai is not representing China, because it's like Shanghai is sort of like the New York of China.
Hmm.
So you can't only check Shanghai as an index because it's like when we talk about fashion, it's like everything come from all around the world. It started in Shanghai, and all the places in China they look up to Shanghai. That actually pretty true, especially on fashion. But it's quite interesting when there are quite a few more regional city like Chengdu, Hangzhou, Chongqing. They were upcoming, and like the young generations of people there, they were actually like getting on the they were very active, but at the same time it's like they were not completely look like Shanghai. So I think this happened in these 2 or 3 years, which is quite different. And at the same time, it's like there were one thing you mentioned about like they care about like the tradition of Chinese culture, and it actually works a lot within at least like 3 4 years. More and more like in like Chinese talent, they were started to dig into their own culture. There is like a phenomenon. I would say it's like a lot of young people, they care a lot about like what they own for
Mm.
their history, their own culture, and they want to develop something new from there. But not only like just from the educations on the Western country, or a lot of like the talent, they were educated abroad in the state or in UK or in Europe, and then probably they understand like one of the key part of them from the inspiration of their creation is related to their background, which they can have like a completely different voice on this is yet to find. So more and more talents, they will start to think in a different way. I think this is infected because of such a globalizations phenomenon within like a decades before. So it's like people just jump in, like Chinese just jump into the international state, and then they think about it's like who am I, and how can we make us special? How
Mm.
can we have a statement if we use fashion as a language to express ourselves? What type of language we want the people to listen to us, and or at least we have like something different from around the world, because it's always like on fashion creation or fashion designer, you always want to have something you own as your language. I mean, yeah. So that's becoming really important in China, I think.
Yeah, and the thing is, if you think about in the 80s and 90s, China was very much a production capital of the world, making things for everybody, and still is. It's been the 2000s, and now is a consumer country, right? I mean,
Yeah.
all the brands are very much driving to and they cater to that consumer, fashion, non-fashion. It's one of the largest markets in the world. But what I'm interested to know is that, as you mentioned, as people try to find their own DNA and their artistic vision, the local designers, the local creators, the local fashion designers, are they being supported by their own market? Is Chinese purchasing Chinese luxury goods, Chinese goods as well? Or they still very much cater to maybe European luxury brands or European fashion, American fashion?
I think what there was one thing, like, as I was coming from Hong Kong, so there is one thing which is very different. It's like when you are in Hong Kong, not it's very quite different. People don't normally support Hong Kong designer. So it's like in Hong Kong customer, they want, it's like the luxury customer, they want to buy luxury stuff, international one, or like really trendy designer around the world. But they it doesn't seem like, well, when I was still in Hong Kong, it doesn't seem like people were supporting Hong Kong designer. Even I have like a few Chinese Hong Kong designer friend for the moment, and they always said that, oh, it's so difficult to earn a living, or like you have to control like the scales and stuff. But in China, actually very different. I mean, like I meet a lot of like customers. They were luxury customer. They buy all the luxury stuff, but at the same time, they buy Chinese designer. They very support and Chinese
Mm.
designer. It doesn't mean that it's like I only go for the luxury stuff. I can have them all if I think they were interesting. If I think these clothes is fitting my lifestyle, and so they will buy. It's not competitive in a way. It's like, oh, if I choose luxury designer, if I choose like independent designer internationally, then I won't buy, I won't support Chinese designer. It's not the same case. The case is actually, I think like the Chinese design, the Chinese customer really support Chinese designer, the Chinese customer, I mean. And at the same time, it's like there was some quite interesting phenomenon for like the Chinese. A lot of Chinese students were study abroad,
Mm.
and they were one of like the biggest customer on in when we talk about in Europe or in UK or in the State, they were buying Chinese designer there. So you can feel it because it's like, oh, okay, because this is we are all Chinese, so we can support each other. And I think that pretty much tell like when you are a Chinese designer, you feel that people, your customer, your people would actually support if you can put, get like really good design or like produce like a nice collection. They will be proud of you or happy for you. I think this part is quite interesting. Yeah, because it's like for you need it for like young designer. You need that support from your local people, and it works in China a lot, I have to say.
Yeah, that's terrific. And the interesting thing, so it is, of course, a sense of pride, right? You support your fellow countrymen, but also, but it's not only that, right? Because I'm sure as the consumer is being more well educated about goods, they're also looking for something specific. So they're not only supported because you are from the same country, but they also believe and perhaps like what you're creating. Is
Mm.
that like more or less the conversation?
I think fashions right now is just like because I've been working on fashion for like 20 years, and the fashion at this stage right now is like they represent something. It's like they represent a phenomenon, they represent a group of people, they represent your value. So not like before when we were talking about like from the 80s is like it's like an expression which is like to voice out, which you are very
Mm.
different from the other, because it's like in the society, if you're fashionable, you are being quite different from, yeah, and you have to stand for what you stand for in terms of style. In the 90s, there are a sort of like quite functional or quite career or people like a lot of designer, they represent a sort of like professional elite, um intelligent individual. And then after that, the millennium, after millennium with like the social media, it is more expressing your group of people, like a community. And especially right now, it's really related to what you believe in for, like sustainability or diversity. Is more about your value. And so that's why when you're supporting Chinese designer, which is to say you believe in them, you believe in Chinese design, and if you're Chinese people, you have to believe in your designers too. So this is one part of what I think which is quite important for the moment. And it helps the creative because it's motivated them to think about like, okay, so if we want to express ourselves by using fashion, so what can we create? And then the people will support you when they buy it, or they will be happy to see you at your show, and then they will give you a like on the social media. So it's about these reactions on the society. I think that pretty much quite interesting as a phenomenon right now.
Do you find sometimes, I don't want to say the word dangerous, but something it can be challenging when you realize so much of identity with what you wear? How you that's you know what I mean?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. It is actually changed a lot. I mean, like before it's like when we were talk about in the 90s, so what you wear represent who you are, but because this represent like your lifestyle or your style and who you are. So if you like music or if you like rock and roll, then you probably would just punk or rock or whatever.
Mm.
So you have a certain style. But after millennium, there was something different, or actually, from what I observed recently within this decade, because of I think quite likely is because of the usage of social media, it changed the perspective. It's becoming something quite like a symbol. So what you wear, it actually didn't represent who you are, but representing who you want people think who you are. So
Mm.
so it's a tag. It's a tag. So that's why it changed. So you get okay. So when you met someone with tattoo, you well back in the old day, you think, oh, okay, this guy maybe is dangerous, or like, oh, okay,
Yeah.
this guy will be like, oh, okay, so can I talk to him? And now it doesn't mean anything. So you see, like, you can see a lot of like girl or boys, they have full tattoo on the street in China, and then when you're trying to go talk to them, it's like a normal person. So that becoming something much more like what you wear. You know what I mean? So it represents something. Maybe you want people think you are cool, or you want people think who you are. But is that really who he is or she is? You have to talk to them. Yeah.
Mm.
On that part, I think it's quite different because it's like back in the old days, it was like they were not. So when you see a bunch of kids like a skateboarder, so they really like don't skate, they really dare to do anything and stuff. And now everyone carry like a skateboard on the street, not only in China, which is everywhere. It become quite trendy. But that can be good or bad. I mean, like it really representing the generations. It changed a lot. Like people are much more open to what they wear, which is quite good. And you're not less offensive when people were judging who you are, or just. And but at the same time, it's like it's not that serious. Like, oh, okay, you have a dress code and stuff. It's becoming quite, yeah. People don't talk as much about like, oh, okay, you dress properly. Only if you are working for like a brand, like bank or accountant, you have to keep your professional aesthetic. Maybe it's easier to have the trust for your client, but all the others, like, it's losing that type of like a dress code, I would say.
So we can clearly notice a change of, as you mentioned, mindset, right? People really, those lines that you mentioned about if you were a puck rank or a skateboard, it's kind of blurry these days, right? You can do dress like and be all of that, but it doesn't really mean you fit specifically on that one category. Has that also changed the culture itself, or that's still very much a more traditional way to see things, how families are being raised and kids are being raised in China?
I think people are much more open. Like before, there are always have some perceptions about like, okay, so you don't like when we talk about our parents, so maybe they were like, I don't know the case in the state, but like in China or in Hong Kong, they was like, okay, of course you should have like to be a professional, like accountant, like banker, like lawyer or doctor, because like you can earn a good living in the future. But now it's like people, like the parent, they don't mind you as an artist or musician, or like even doing sport, because it's like the world is getting variety and people are quite open right now. And that not only representing the on fashion, but also is like representing the perceptions of how people think in terms of career.
Hmm.
Yeah, so I think it's a quite phenomenon. People are getting quite open compare, and also on creative too. because it's like, okay, it's quite difficult to define what is creative. And even like when you work in business, you have to be creative. You work on a lot of job, you have to be creative. So it's like people, you can see people are much more open about like, to if my kid were working on creative, I'm happy for him. And but it's yet to define what is the next creative career in the future. Maybe only like there is something coming up in few years. So I always talk about that with my kid. It's like, okay, so it's like for my parents, it's like, oh, they want me to be an accountant to have like a proper income, you know. So I actually graduated from accounting. But
There you go.
yeah, but then like from and then I started to think about it's like, well, of course you have your perceptions or expectations for your kid, but it's not normally that's what the path they are if you're not working on like traditional career like the professional career I was talking about. And then I actually think because I work in creative field for quite a long time, and then one
Mm.
day I was talking with my son. I was like, "Oh, okay. To be honest, I think you have to create your career in the future, because I'm sure there is a lot of job will be disappear, which I cannot expect what would be coming up in next few years, and there is jobs and jobs were popping, and at the same time, it's like you have to find a way to make your living, and the way of make your living you have to be creative because it's like you have to create your role on the society,
Yes.
and that would be
Yeah.
your career. Yeah, so I think that pretty much like would become like quite common in the future. Yeah, because especially when we were talking about it's like, okay, so we have like so many enemy right now with like AI or Chat GPT, or it's like, I would say so it's a phenomenon that people will say, okay, they will we all our job will be replaced by them. And then I
Hmm.
was like, okay, yeah, well, things come and goes, and yeah, if you're not if your position has been replaced by AI or Chat GPT, then you have to create your your new position. I mean, we always find our way. I mean, like because we are not supposed to serve the computer, we are serving people. We work with people, so we have to find our way to create something, and we all need to be happy or we want to be creative. So I think creative mindset is very important in the future. I mean, like, yeah, that's what I was always thinking about is like for this couple of years.
Yeah, we can notice that creativity has very much moved in a way that how people see it now as a level of intelligence. It's no longer just an artistic vision or like something like that. Like people see creativity equal to, you know, you can be creative coding, program software. There's so many ways of creativity. So I
Yeah,
think
yeah,
that
yeah.
the paradigm has shifted. It's not only so much about being, an artist, an artist or an artistic vision, but also you can be, as you mentioned, you can be creating a business. You can be created as an accountant. You can be creative in so many different
Exactly.
ways.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
And that's one thing that the AI and some of the, they're can quite equal to us in that aspect. It make us so human, right?
Yeah, yeah. Because I actually really think about that because when I was thinking about shit, like, oh, for my kid, they will be probably like facing AI a lot. So, what can they be? How it would be like a better tools for them to not really against AI, but like I mean, like you have to keep yourself at least confident. I think creative is a mindset, so it's like you can be creative on every single thing. Like you can be creative on creating your food or creating your lifestyle, or it's just like a more positive way to
Mm,
adjust. Because it's like people normally would when you create something, there is a sense of happiness. No matter this creation is important or not, maybe you just draw like some little thing on the table, or like you handwriting and then give a smile. It's like everything you can actually create a lot on every day, and then it can give you yourself a little bit of happiness. I think it's quite mentality. It's a mentality. And then you always look for something creative in your life. When you walk out the street, you're trying to find like, okay, so this guy was walking like this, and then why is that happen like this, and why this guy was wearing this and that, why that hat was turning around or whatever. It's like, and that actually drive you to think about, it's like, so I think mentally would be much more healthier, I think, because it's like I think one of the things is there was a lot of people like have mental illnesses, or like have mental it's always depression and stuff. It's like because they were focusing on themselves too much. And
Mm.
then actually the world, there was like, if you see outside of yourself and then to find those interesting thing or inspiring thing, you can actually but easier to balance you out, or you got, I think it's easier for you to get inspiration outside your outside your like your brain. And but most of the time we are thinking too much about ourselves, and which is quite complicated to create something different out of your our mindset, you know.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I do notice people that fully embrace the mindset, as you mentioned, the creativity aspect. They're more willing to take chances, and they're okay with the idea of not failing, but they're okay with things not working out the way they want to. But they use those strings in those lessons to make something different. So they're more organic, they're more fluid, right? They move around, they adapt it better, and I think that if is allowing us to perhaps be more forgiving with ourselves, that we don't need to do everything perfect all the time, that sometimes one door closes but another one opens. So
Yeah.
there's a little conversation there that I notice a lot of time when I talk to creative people, and they always chasing a feeling. They don't really quite can verbalize exactly what they're looking for. It's like that there's almost like a gut feeling, a sense of happiness, a fulfillment that once they complete their vision, or at least part of their vision. We never know if it's fully completed, because a lot of people too who are creative people, they're perfectionists, and
Yeah.
that can be challenges too.
Yeah. But there are something quite interesting, because it's like when we face failure. So it's like if you face failure, and then it's like, oh, you're really upset because it's like, oh, I'm fail or whatever. But at the same time, it's like if you can be, if you are a creative people, when you see failure, you think this is a challenge. So it
Mm,
doesn't feel like the end of the story. So if you only looking at the failure itself, which means this is the end of your story, then of course you cannot go over it. But if you see it as a challenge, then it doesn't mean that you can beat it, but you can walk around it, and then you find the next task. So just not too focus on a small little thing, or it would be easier to find a solution. And because it's
mm,
like there's no perfect solution, there is no perfect answer. If even like, especially when it's just a very simple question. It's like when we were trying to, okay, let's say we try to do a drawings, or we try to edit like a movie, like even your YouTube, like a short edit. So when did you end your edit? So it's like, of course, you can be better. You can always be better. It can be shorter. It can be faster. It can be have
mm,
more content. But there was a certain moment you think, oh, okay, so this probably would be the right time to stop, and then I can start the other thing. And that is more related to your experiment. And then it came across, so you can like the next time you say, oh, okay, I can edit it a little bit better than the one before, or I find like a more interesting angle, or when I was shooting videos, it's like, okay, this time I shoot it like this, and then next time I move the camera like that to make it slightly different, and then you have a different point of view, and then you see things in a different angle, and then you got like are motivated. So it's like, oh, this worked better, or actually that one was better. So we go back, or yeah, I think this is quite interesting. But for me, I really like working on creative. So and and especially when you work with people and then you can communicate, you can discuss, and then you say, oh, what do you think? Do you think this is better or not, or whatever? So it's like I think this create a certain type of magic. Yeah.
And is that how you prefer to deal with creativity? Because what you do requires a great level of creativity. Is more engaging with people, having conversation, piggyback, having feedbacks, or maybe a moment of solitude, being by yourself. It's the best way. Do you have like a specific way to get in the
I
zone?
I think I have different stage of life, and then I change or slightly changes from time to time. So it's like when I'm working on magazine, when I was an editor, I do a lot of like interview, and then I shoot something, and then but at the same time I do a lot of interview. Because it's like I want to talk to people about creativity, or like where the inspiration, and then at a certain point when I got kind of like what I want, and then I started to actually get from the interview to trying to draw out how this person to so is to describe. It's not like the text itself or the conversation itself is not that important, but I was trying to use the text to give you the idea about the sense of this guy. So who is he, or how he think, or how he react, or why he would come up with an idea like this, or how what is he in his mind. And then after that, I work because I was working on two magazines as the chief editor. I need to work with a lot of people. And then I started to think about, okay, so how I'm not like working on my own article anymore. So I have to get like a framework of what I want to do on these issues. And then
Hmm.
I will tell them, okay, so the idea, or like I will give a bunch of like tags, or like a write little notes about the theme, and then I find some of the visual, and then I say, okay, so let's talk about flower, these issues, and then there are some artists related to flowers. I want this appear all over the magazine. So it's like if you were interviewing someone which is not related to flower, can you put a flower on the back, on the portrait, as the background of the portrait? So it just I don't want everything to be so direct, but there was a sense of like a need to things related to flower, or this people is famously a flower lover, or yeah. So and then they can jump into a conversation related to a flower, even maybe he or her professionally is completely out of flower, but that is okay, because it's like that's how you deal with the world, because it's like you meeting people around the world. They have all different identity, they all think differently. Yeah. And then so I started to think about, so what to create is more related to you set the framework. So it's like if you set the, oh, okay, let's say this is a brief. So when you're working with the other, so you have like a proposal, or you bring out a brief, and then so send it to them, and then they will know, okay, what is in your mind and how you want it. And then if they have more questions, they can jump into you, and then they will ask you, so, oh, okay, so I have this idea. Do you think this is like the right things to do, or is that like going over all the other contents of your magazine? And so it's like, and then like people have been so they have more engagement, because it's like you give them a sort of like a task, and then they will like, okay, they will find the solution, and then they will be motivated. and then they will talk about, oh, okay, I really like this artist because, and most of the time, maybe I don't know these artists because it's like nobody can know everything. And then I would got inspired, and it's like, oh, okay, so this is the magic. And if you were very focusing on the creation of yourself, you can create it by yourself. So you don't need to work with people. So it's not a one-off question. So it's like, oh, okay, you can only work by yourself or you can only work with the others. I think it's like it really depends on what you want to create. I can I can work on the sub by myself if I'm capable on working on a small project. But at the same
Hmm.
time, it's like there are some project you need to work with people. So that's why you have to find a way and you try to take a balance. And there was something quite interesting about creative. It's like sometimes you don't really actually need to create something and show it to the others. So some of this creation is actually you keep it for yourself. So I can do like small little, I can actually do some emoji and then I don't send it to everybody. I just trying to entertain myself too. Yeah, I think it was
Hmm.
like, okay, wow, it's quite silly, but I did it when I was drunk. And then I'm not sending, I don't need to share with the others. So there are, but it gives you some sense of like the happiness about creation, and it drives me a lot. Yeah,
You have had the chance to interview and meet a lot of very creative people. And
yeah.
looking back now, is there anyone that really stand out that all the time keep bringing you back to it?
I have, yeah, because it's like I work on fashion for a very long time, so I actually interview a lot of like designer, like Karl Lagerfeld. I interview Wei Kubo. I interview Ralph Simon. I interview Nicholas Giscard, and I actually interview a lot. And at the last, maybe in the last 5 years of my life in media, I was trying to understand why these people would think in a different way. And it's always quite inspiring, like, because it's like they have like, it's more related to um their their hobbies, I would say. So if you like something, it's like, yeah, it's quite simple. Like, oh, maybe this guy was really like animation, or this guy was really like music, or this guy and he really like a certain of like artists, and that give me a different way of definition about languages. So it's like at the few these few years I always discuss with people about like this idea of a second language. And that second language more like art as a language or music as a language or fashion as a language, which is actually they they were verbal language, but they represented in terms of more than just a word. So let's say, oh, okay, let's do an exercise like this. So it's like when we talk about 70s, when we talk about fashion, then in your mind would be a lot of pictures related to the designer of the 70s or like the 70s style or like 60s. You definitely would think about these hippies or space age and stuff. And we talk about music, then you about 70s, you probably will think about punk. And I don't actually need to give you a lot of text, and you will understand what I mean. Because it's like it
Hmm.
happens on movie. Because it's like if you read books and you saw movie and you listen to music, these elements all came across into your mind. And it doesn't stop you because I'm Chinese and you're American or you're European. It doesn't stop you as much, especially when we all connected with with the internet right now. So all these images they were flowing in terms of like the same stage or same thing. So we actually can communicate easier. in terms of not only in terms of works, because it's like, okay, so let's say if I trying to teach you what is pong verbally, it's quite complicated though. I have to describe a lot about like, oh, they what kind of style or how crazy they were when they were performing and stuff, and then you don't actually have a sense if you don't see the pictures of pong. But if you saw it, then you don't need me to explain a lot. And this is like, so that's why this visual language or like this second language I think is quite interesting to let us to communicate better than before, which we don't have a translator like a Google translator can translate it like this.
Not yet. Not yet.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. But it's
I
all about this communication because it's like when we need to work with like creative people, we need to communicate quite directly, like what we're thinking or what are we're seeing right now. And then it was like, oh, can we twist this a little bit to create something new? Or we were not copying completely because it's like there was no meaning to copy it, but we can give layers of this work, or we can transform it into something much more modern to represent what we want to tell, the story we want to tell, the message we want to tell by combining these different elements all together.
want to ask you about something. I had this conversation with a friend of mine a few weeks ago, and it's a little bit part of the business of fashion. And when we talked about this earlier, being China being one of the biggest market in the world for fashion luxury. But yet, when I look at the fashion houses, there's no, as far as correct me if I'm wrong, I don't see any creative director from
Yes,
China.
yes.
So what are we missing here? Why do we still, really get stuck with the same models, I know there's more diversity these days, but when we talk about that your goal is to very much cater to one of the largest markets in the world, but the person running your creative machine
Hmm.
doesn't really have a full identity of that group of people. I know there's a global brand, so there's more than just one, but I almost feel there's a little bit of a missed opportunity. What do you have any thoughts on that?
I have think about it before, but I was trying to find a solution um, in an alternative way by starting to ask Japanese designer why there was like a phenomenon which happened in the 70s or 80s about Japanese design, but still not so many Japanese designer were being at the house of like a creative director of like major fashion house,
Mm-hmm.
which recently we have Nico.
Yep.
Yeah, but like I asked the question right before, like probably a few years before, because I want to foresee if there is any references we can see, and then we can try to change this to China. So it's like as a reference points, I think a lot, and I talk to a lot of people, especially Japanese designer. And then first of all, I think language is a problem because they haven't actually communicate with you directly. If you are a Japanese designer or a Chinese designer, they didn't know like if they can like the team can communicate very well with you, and that was actually related to some sort of the thing I was talking about. It's like, do you have the same type of language you can communicate? And then if you want to hire someone as a creative director, you have to first of all you have to have this guy have like know how to lead the team and have to know how to communicate very well within a bunch of people they never work with, and not very easy for like a foreign brand to have the fully trust with someone from China or Japan because the languages are so different. So this is one of the things they it will stop a little bit about them because basically they were taking a risk if they don't know you as much, or they never really work with you. And at the same time, it's like the Chinese designer right now, most of them they were quite young, and then I don't think they would trust, but I think things would change in a few years, and hopefully, like more and more Chinese designer was going about. Well, I'm foreseeing like within these 2 or 3 years, more and more Chinese designer would head to Paris or Milan to do show, and then people would appreciate Chinese designer, and they if they were showing the varieties of creation through all their collection, there would be an opportunity for them to be the creative director. I think now they were I think brands or like even headhunter is not, they never thought about it, but at the same time it would be a huge risk if they don't take the right person to do this position, you know. And at the same time, it's like, to be honest, like the head of creative director for the moment is around 40. So you can see
Mm.
like it's about like the age of 40. So they were leading. So you see a field designer like them is around the age of 40, and then they were kind of like very important right now. And most of like the Chinese designer right now is at their 30. So it's still some time for them to show them they are actually um, able to take an important position on international stage. I think there is still, you still definitely need a few years to give them a chance to show how much they were capable of.
I agree with you. I think it's a matter of time, but I also think it probably is going to have to be someone within, which means someone that started on his own. He's been working the company for a few years, you know, and earned
Yeah.
their spot to be there, being groomed by that company to understand the dynamic. But I agree, it will be a matter of time before we see that for sure. Uh, Listen, have a feeling that we can be here for another hour or two and have all this more conversation about the industry and everything else. But I want to be respectful of your time. And but before I let you go, I always ask three questions to every guest. And number one is a recommendation, a book to read. Number two, a movie, a TV show, something to watch. And number three, who should it be a guest here at the podcast? Who would you like to see here?
I have to answer it right now.
Yeah. Put you on the
There-
spot. That's the
There's
purpose of this game. So I can put everybody their back against the wall and they're like, oh my God.
a book. Mm, okay, a book. A book. Can I name some? Oh, okay. It's like okay. The free question is like about a movie
And a
and
guess.
and a
Somebody to
guest,
be part of the pod. Yes.
and the guest is I recommend to be in the show.
Yeah.
Like
Somebody that you like to hear from, someone that think would be great
oh
over here. Whatever you think.
um like the person first, because it's like it's always my favorite. It would be Paris.
Okay.
So I talked to them because like I was a huge fan of them. Well, I was a huge fan of Paris like for a very long time, because it's like they, especially when I saw what they had done for Palais de Tokyo before, and then they create some sort of like a alien language, and then it's more like all these different type of symbol, and then they is sort of like pretending it's a type of like a alien language, and then it's an enlightenment for me about like how you can use visual to change the perception. It's like visual is not only because it's like from my background of education, it's just like when we talk about arts or when we talk about graphic and stuff, it's all visual, and all visual is related to an aesthetics, and it's not much for me to understand. There are something like, okay, you can express more than the aesthetics, you know. So if you were a graphic designer, you think, okay, they can put these, find the right fonts or like to lay out beautifully, make you like feel like really like it. But what they have done, I think like it's so much more than that. They create something, it's like they actually can create a whole bunch of story. They think so much more than you think. And when you started to go through it to understand it, you will create something maybe they didn't actually create it. So there is a lot of inspirations from them, which is very inspiring for me. I see the power of visual.
Mm.
Yeah, it's the next level. So it's like, okay, maybe they will think in that way, but at the same time, it's like the work done here. Let me think of something else, and which is more than just a piece of graphic. And I really like them, so I trying to find a work because it's like when I was in magazine, I always trying to find my excuse to meet these people I like, to have a real conversation with them. And then I can like, yeah, I met with them, and then I go to their office, I talk to them, and it's like inspiring. They have a quite different way of think, like because like there were two of them, so I don't know how they discuss because it's like in front of me they didn't discuss. Like one guy was sitting backwards, so it was like listening here, and the other was talking to me, and then which is actually pretty pretty cool. Yeah, but yeah, highly recommended. I mean, like if you have them on the program, I will really, I'm definitely want to watch it out, and I want to ask questions still. But I really like them. And for books, that was kind of tough though. There were so many books I like. Uh, I really don't know, but there was something I was thinking of because it's like, okay, there were a lot of different way of seeing books. So it's like I'm always like fiction, and then there was always a lot of people were talking about these uh not, oh, I forgot the way, but it's like I really like fiction, and I really like ghost story, and I think it's quite interesting because how much people can create from nothing.
Mm.
And I really like fiction. I think fiction is a sense of like the basic thing on creation because it's like it's just purely out of your brain and you write it down. And you have to convey, no, but the most important thing, you have to create it. You have to persuade people this is real and this is magic. And this is like some sort of like purely creation out of your brain, and then because you have to believe it enough. And there is one thing really important about creativity is like you have to believe it. If you don't believe it, you cannot create because it's like it's not persuasive. It's just like you can't present something you don't create, which is bullshit. And then you got burnout or like people with black face or rolling their eyes, and then you feel frustrated, but at a certain point, because you don't believe in it too, so you cannot fight for it. And for fiction, well, I'm not talking about bad fiction. I mean, like, but a lot of fiction I know I really like is like this is just a little idea and it grows. There are some I actually like a lot of like Japanese designer, Japanese writer, but I don't know how to pronounce it in English. I can write you some of their names, and
Yeah,
then
send the name, we'll
yeah, I
put the
think
name
I think
underneath.
they were quite I think they were very crazy, like they have these thing out of their mind. It's like animations. So it's like how can they think of something like this? It's like it's just crazy. Yeah. So I don't know. I can pick you a few books and then I'll write you the name, but like yeah. But
That
definitely
works.
I think fiction is is very important. I think it's like one of what like one. I read a lot. I listen to a lot of podcasts and stuff. It's like, but it comes and goes. I like real people telling real story, which I like ghost story. I actually watch so many ghost movie all the time. It's
Mm.
more like a study. When I was like, there was like when I was talking with my friend, it was like how much I like to watch ghost story. They were like, why you're like so addicted to scare yourself? And it's like, I don't think it's scary because it's like I actually see quite common grounds about human beings. So it's like, okay, why there are always some story which go through every culture, and they were very similar. So they were scared of the similar things, and then there was sort of like, okay, the zombie or like the dead with they come back and stuff, and then there was a story which is actually going through from Mexican to China to so many different ways to Japan. They have like quite similar story, which actually they were from their own languages, but they had something common. And so which makes me feel it's like there are common fear. It's like
Mm.
love. So it's like we don't have to describe love in different language because it's like when we talk about love, we all know what it is. But scare is the same thing. It's a reactions on this. So that's why I really like Ghost Story and a movie. You should have write me before. It would take ages to find the best one. Okay. I want to give you a good one. So okay, there is one. Oh, maybe is a quite interesting. I don't name you one, but I want to name you a form of movie or TV
Okay.
series which I like right now. It's like okay, so the top is like the one in Oscar. Shit, what's the name?
The one that just won the Oscar, the Everything Everywhere at
Yes,
Once.
yes.
Okay.
So this and have you watched Player Number One?
Yes.
Yeah, have you watched The Stranger Things?
Yes.
Yeah, so three of them, how you see it as like if I'm trying to find like a formula or like a group of what they were representing, it's like okay, because first of all, we are in a we are actually in an era with like so many message, and then at the same time it's like we are very busy, so we have to go
Mhm.
through so many things every day. And the smarter thing about this movie, the three of them, they represent something more than itself. So they actually video the way they shoot this video is with their memory, with the directors. So with their understanding of what they see before. So let's say like player number one with all these characters. So you know when they appears like a marble or like the dinosaur or so they bring
Yeah.
back a piece of your memory into the movie. So they don't need to have more story to tell because the character itself, they bring the story into another story. So actually, within these 2 hours, you have like tons of millions of hours of message actually activated your brain, which is kind of quite interesting.
Mm.
And at the same time, it's like Stranger Thing reminds you a lot with your memory about like if you watch ET before,
Yeah.
it's all these like with the BMW with the BMX, these kids riding the BMX, and they were facing these like crazy enemy or like an alien and stuff. It's like this react your memory with your childhood related to ET, and that was the magic. I mean, like, how can you? Well, when I first saw it, when I think about it, it's like, why? I think this is very interesting. It's like, do I have the same feeling with the young kid if they like the show or not? But definitely we have different understanding. And
Yeah.
I think this is very inspiring because it's like how you can react with people's memory by your by your work, by your artwork, or by your creation. I think that was like giving my idea about like how we transform. So it's like it's not purely about like okay you have to do well because it's like there was a long process of time. It's like when we talk about creative, we always focus on like originality.
Mm,
But it's like oh okay so how can you produce something original like it never happened before? I don't think actually this is very necessary because it's like we
yeah.
even we when we are trying to do creative, we can actually create on the top of the shoulder of the giant, you know. So we were trying to build because we shouldn't take like get out all our influence or like our background or culture impact or whatever. These are part of us. So it's like when we do creation, we make decision and we have judgment. It's all related to the thing we educate us. When we face us, it processes it in our brain. But we have to transform it into our own languages. And then we use our work to communicate with different people. And then this movie I think is very inspiring because when they communicate with different ages of all audience, they probably would get very different type of content in their mind.
Mm,
Yeah, and
true.
that I think is I think this is a very interesting form of creation which happened within this decade, and especially when we are talking about like a lot of short form videos right now. If you want to react more content, it's like oh, okay, it's like people are watching this video in 15 second or 30 second, but how can you when trying to put 30 second of material within this 15 second or even more, then you have to find a way to implant more memory into that scenario. And that was yeah that was well I'm sure this is very tired, but but as a form on creation, I think that can works.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for the lovely conversation. As I mentioned before, I'm sure we could do this for another hour. But maybe we do this. Maybe we, we reconnect again
Sure.
in a couple episodes ahead, and we continue this conversation. I think there's a lot here that we can still unpack and discuss further. But I want to thank you again for taking the time, and we truly appreciate it.
My pleasure. Well, lovely to talk to you. I mean, like, yeah, of course, if you need to talk to someone, then I'm always on.
Minded Podcast, powered by the CDA.